Fergus Falls and they're on their way to Alexandria, and by that time it's cooled down, and it's still good hot coffee. But in any event, at the trial, evidence was introduced of 700 claims of burns from hot coffee. Coffee at 185 to 190 degrees is capable of causing third-degree burns requiring skin grafts. And that's exactly what was going on here. And if you watch this movie, you'll see some very unpleasant pictures of the burns in question and what the skin grafts look like and so forth. The costs alone of trying to bring the woman back to the health that she enjoyed before the coffee spilled on her were in the range of $165,000. And that was largely the so-called compensatory damages of the case. The $2.7 million was punitive damages. Punitive damages are, Mr. Defendant, don't do it again kind of damages. We're going to teach you a lesson that you shouldn't do this, McDonald's. You should quit putting out coffee that can cause third-degree burns. It doesn't have to be that hot. You ought to quit it. You ought to not ignore 700 claims because it's easier to ignore the claims or deal with the claims piecemeal than it is to change the whole system. And furthermore, the judge reduced the punitive damages from $2.7 million down to less than $500,000. So it's a little bit different story. I can talk to you about the phone booth case as well and tell a similar story. That's the one where the guy gets hit by a car when he's in a phone booth and he sues the phone company. And how ridiculous, how outrageous is that? Except that that phone booth had been hit more than once before, but the phone company liked it. Now, of course, there are no phone booths anywhere anymore because everybody's got a cell phone in their pocket. Which my wife told me to be sure to shut mine off. And I'm not sure I've done that. I was with somebody recently who, when her cell phone rang, it played Schiller's Ode to Joy, the ninth movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Mine doesn't do that, but I hope it doesn't go off. Anyway, the guy tried to get out of the phone booth. We couldn't get out because the door was broken from the previous accident. The phone company hadn't fixed it. Well, so there's two sides to some of these stories. But what I would like to talk about is some statistics that are available from the Department of Justice, which talk about what's been happening in recent times. I can lay hands on those. And the upshot of it is that the Department of Justice surveyed, I think it was the 17 most populous counties in the United States of America, and they looked at hundreds of thousands of cases. And it turned out that the plaintiffs won about half the time, 56% of the time according to their statistics. But the average, the median verdict was $24,000. And the comment that was made about that is how many plaintiffs that prevailed and got $24,000 wish they had never tried, considering what it costs these days to get to the jury verdict at all in most cases because of the way they're very often defended. And only 4% of all of these hundreds of thousands of cases involved a verdict in excess of $1 million. And punitive damages verdicts were a small percentage of the total, and they themselves were in a range of far less than $100,000. The don't do it again, you should know better, we're going to teach you a lesson not to do it again type of damages were a very small percentage. So that's one of the problems. The other problem is the suicide part of the way that the civil justice system has been going. I served all during 2011 on a task force created by the Minnesota Supreme Court called the Civil Justice Reform Task Force. About 30 people. The structure of the task force was kind of interesting. It was composed of lawyers and judges. There was one judge who was from Duluth, and there was one lawyer who was from St. Cloud, and one lawyer who was from Rochester, and me. And all the rest of the 30 were from the Twin Cities metro area. So I took some satisfaction in being the only real country lawyer in the bunch, because St. Cloud and Rochester are simply appendages of the Twin Cities anyway. Right down the interstate, you never get out of the city between the time you leave the city and get to Rochester or St. Cloud. So, what did we find as we met on a monthly basis throughout 2011? Where are the problems that have come up in the civil justice system? And we could spend the rest of the night talking about them, which I do not intend is going to happen. One is simply cost. It's gotten expensive to try lawsuits, like it's got expensive to do quite a lot of other things in the world. But certainly expense has dampened people's enthusiasm to start lawsuits. Delay has been a problem. Gladstone in the 19th century said, "Justice delayed is justice denied," and there's a lot of truth in that. And you can be delayed quite a long time in trying to get a complex case to trial before a jury because of the competition that it runs into on the judge's schedule with the daily mix of business that the court focuses upon. During all my years on the Judicial Selection Commission, if a trial lawyer who I knew to have had a significant jury trial practice applied for a judgeship, I would always ask, is this what you want to do? Because you're not going to be seeing very many complex jury trials of the type that you've been handling in your practice. 80 to 90% of your work is going to be of family law, criminal, child protection, those kinds of things. That's what fills up the courts, and that's what complex civil cases are encountering. I have had one recently in which all the lawyers agreed that this was a case that was going to take at least 2 weeks to try, 10 days of jury trial. And the judge kind of cast his eyes into the back of his head and asked his calendar clerk to try to find a time when he could give this case 2 weeks of jury trial. And he found a time and scheduled the trial to occur about a year from the scheduling conference. Then it was decided that by the plaintiff that it was necessary to have another party defendant. He did another scheduling conference, took another look, and I had to get a later trial date so that the added party could get up to speed. And the judge found another trial date, another year in the future. And without going into details, it happened the third time. The courts are crowded with a daily grind of business that is not compatible with complex civil cases that used to be tried to courts and juries. Third problem that we found on the task force is that the outcome is less predictable, and maybe it always has been, as compared to the alternative, which for many businesses is arbitration. You select your own judge, who is also a jury, and that man or woman, often but not necessarily, is a lawyer who may well have been and still is a trial lawyer, such as something that I do quite a lot and have for a number of years. And you have something to say about who that person is going to be. You used to have something in a way to say about who the jurors were going to be, because you'd get a list of them in advance, and you could at least look into them and see if you knew them, and you would probably know the judge quite well. Now, if you're trying a case in the metropolitan counties, you may have no idea who the judge is going to be that will be trying your case, and you certainly will have no idea of who the jurors are going to be. And as the jurors, that's true right here in Otter Tail County as well as anywhere else. What to do about that problem? One of the results is there aren't enough trials, jury trials, to teach young lawyers how to try jury cases, a problem that we have in our office. Sometimes you can cure that problem by volunteering young lawyers to the criminal system to try criminal cases. There are more of those that are tried. Other problems have been that the preparation process has gotten too complex and too expensive, and there's been what the term is a lack of proportionality in the handling of cases. If it's a simple case that ought to go to trial fast, then it ought to be treated like a simple case and go to trial fast, and that has not been what's happening. You don't know when your case is going to go to trial. You might have a date for it and think it's going to be tried then, but then a criminal case, which has priority, comes along, and now all of a sudden you're not trying the case anymore. So what do you do about these problems? And we came up with a bunch of proposed solutions. We don't know if any of them are going to be adopted or not, but to establish proportionality in cases, to have earlier judicial evaluation of the case, to leave the case in the hands of one judge rather than you don't know who the judge is going to be out of 20 or 40 different possibilities. I had a suggestion for complex cases, which I thought made a lot of sense. Treat them more like arbitration. Create a special panel of judges to try complex civil cases, and let the lawyers have something to say about who the judge might be. Not to name their own judge like it can happen in arbitration, but at least to nominate to the chief judge of the district from a panel of judges who are placed on the complex case roster. We would like Judge so-and-so to try this case, or we would like one of judges A, B, or C to try this case. And then to create for that judge the opportunity to treat the case as a complex case and not have to try to schedule it in with his daily mix of cases so that he's or she is swatting at things like being in a bottle full of wasps to get time to try the case. That idea did not sell well for one particular reason, that the definition of complex case ended up in the eyes of the task force that I served on, cases that were mass tort cases, that were cases that involved huge numbers of people, huge numbers of claims, dealt with only a certain type of case, such as intellectual property, of which We have a relatively few number of cases out here and so forth. So where will that go? I don't know. But that, I think, explains the fact that we do not have a situation these days where we are talking about outrageous jury verdicts doing damage. I'd like to say before we leave this topic a word about judicial selection and about judicial elections. Minnesota has a system still of electing judges. Most judges are appointed because usually the vacancy occurs before a term has expired, and there's not an open election. Once in a while there is, but usually there's not. And so usually the governor appoints the judge initially on the advice of the Statutory Judicial Selection Commission, which studies the qualifications of the judge and so forth. There's now, particularly at appellate level, courts of appeals such as Minnesota has, Supreme Courts such as Minnesota has, a very strong effort to make those elections highly political in nature. And the U.S. Supreme Court has helped a lot by saying that contributions from corporate entities and labor unions are a matter of free speech, and they can be any amount. So there's been a huge amount of money infused into the judicial selection process. Is that good? There's a very strong argument that it is not good, Senator Dale O'Connor, a now retired Supreme Court Justice, has spoken strongly against it along the lines that if you infuse politics into this process, it influences the outcome of the process, and there are some statistics that support that. An incumbent judge who is being challenged to stay in his position by a heavily financially supported opponent has great difficulty in dealing with that situation. And we've seen the outcome of that in other states. West Virginia is a very good example. John Grissom wrote a book called The Appeal, a novel called The Appeal. If you haven't read The Appeal, I recommend that you read it. It's a very realistic description of what can happen when large corporate interests get involved in trying to get their person seated on an appellate court. And there are statistics that show that that works. Judges have acknowledged that it's very hard not to think about how the ruling you make on a particular case may affect your chances of being reelected. So far, Minnesota has not gone that route, but certainly there is a possibility that it may go that route, and we have concern in that area. So much for killing the lawyers and the judges and the jurors. Suggests that there's some murderers out there that want to do some of that, and there's a certain suicidal conduct that is working out there. I don't think that we need to overtly try to get rid of lawyers and judges and jurors. The system needs to try to survive. And there are some of us that are going to try to make it survive if we can and bring about the changes that need to be brought. Which gets me then to the next level, and that is to talk about the search for justice. And what is it anyway? If you read the dictionary, you're going to come up with words like equitableness and words like that. But is it more than a fair shake? Is that what justice is? in order for me to have justice, I need to get to keep my place in line and not have somebody cut ahead of me, like getting into Walmart when it opens at midnight, like it sometimes does. Do I need to have the ump agree with me that that was a ball and not a strike? Is that justice? Something more serious than that? Do I get to be at my same-sex partner's bedside when that partner's on a deathbed and not be excluded because we're not married? Should justice allow us to be married or to have exactly the same rights? Is that something that the Constitution needs to deal with, as the Minnesota Constitution is going to be dealing with it by the looks of things at the next election this fall? Shall there be a constitutional amendment that forever, because constitutional provisions are hard to change, provide that same-sex marriage shall not occur? Where's the justice on an issue like that? Where's the justice for me when it turns out that most of the CEOs of Fortune 500 corporations are 6'3" and I'm only 5'7"? Now, where's the justice there? Where's the justice for the girl who is 5'1" and weighs 200 pounds and is flat-chested when she wants that job at Hooters, and she can serve a Juicy Lucy just as good as somebody that looks like Giselle Bundchen or somebody like that? Where's justice? We can talk about some folks that would seem to have been dealt mortal blows of injustice. How about Helen Keller? She was born deaf and blind. She dealt a mortal blow by injustice. Did it work out that way? Did she find meaning in life in spite of that that injustice that was visited upon her? What about, it's hard to pronounce, I've written it down to see if I can, Aung San Suu Kyi in Burma, Myanmar now, I guess I've got to say, under house arrest for 20 years. Now she's running for parliament there. Was she dealt in injustice, and did it ruin her life? What about Nelson Mandela, who spent 25 years breaking rock in a prison in South Africa, went on to become president of the nation? So, how do we define justice? Is it even definable in terms of a constant, or is its presence or absence rather situational and relative, like pornography? U.S. Supreme Court Justice said, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Is that is that how we have to deal with justice? We know it when we see it. I'm planning to, assuming my 3 hip replacements let me get off this dais that my critic pointed out I was up on at the beginning of things, to inquire of those of you out there your definition of justice and your ideas on whether or not there is really any justice around, and if it is given to you, if it's a birthright, if it's an inalienable right like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as the Declaration of Independence says, or is it something else? But I should probably try to give you some help from the available literature before we begin doing that. So I did some research. The oldest reference I could find is in the Psalms. Psalm 9, verse 16 says, the Lord is known by his justice. The unjust are ensnared by the work of their hands. Okay. Well, then we get a little more recent in time. We get in the range of 400 or 500 years BC. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus says, if it were not for injustice, men would not know justice. How about that? Aristotle, about the same time, said, it is in justice that the ordering of society is centered. Thought it was important. Justinian, the Roman lawyer and codifier of the first really major codifier of the law, other than perhaps religious law, said, justice rather lets the crime of the guilty go unpunished than condemns the innocent. How about that? There's a great king of Sparta, Agesilaus II, a great warrior. Spartans whose mothers told them when they went to battle, come home carrying your shield or lying dead on it. And he said, courage is of no value unless accompanied by justice. Yet if all men became just, there would be no need for courage. Just about everybody has commented along the way. Epicurus, before the birth of Christ, said that justice is a contract of expediency entered upon to prevent men harming or being harmed. Justice is a contract of expediency. St. Augustine said that charity is no substitute for justice withheld, but St. Francis of Assisi said, alms are an inheritance and a justice which is due to the poor, which Jesus Christ has levied upon us. So we've got all kinds of stuff out there that we can talk about. I've got probably several hundred quotations here. We can spend the rest of the night doing that. I don't think we want to do that. And actually, my time is used up. So I think I'm not going to come out there. I promised Carolyn and Rob that I would, but I'm also sensitive to the fact that I've talked too long already. And we've just got everybody in history coming in on justice, and can life have meaning without justice? There's so much injustice in the world, for heaven's sakes. How much justice is there in Syria right now? How much justice has there been in various African nations? How much justice in Southeast Asia when Pol Pot was around making mountainous piles of the skulls of people? How much justice was there in the 30s and 40s of the 20th century when Nazi Germany extinguished 6 million Jews? We got injustice everywhere out there. So, does life have meaning? As I've suggested, apparently some people like Nelson Mandela and Helen Keller. I could have mentioned Stephen Hawking, a very good example. A nuclear physicist, expert on quantum analysis, who has an ALS-like malady and is largely paralyzed and speaks with a voice synthesizer. if he is alive at this time, I'm not recalling whether or not he still is. Did he find meaning in life in spite of that? And what do you do in the face of injustice, which is seemingly invincible? I have found more help in the analysis